Shofu presents Vintage MP Uni Layer Porcelain, a revolutionary single-layer PFM porcelain system that provides a simple, predictable and economical solution to the modern dental laboratory. With just a few simple steps, you can easily achieve the aesthetics and functionality of the crown and bridge restorations. The base hue is obtained from the opaque layer, while the desired translucency and opalescence is reflected through buildup of either HT high translucency or LT low translucency unilayer porcelain. Fabrication of posterior crown with Vintage MP Unilayer porcelain. Step 1. Application of Vintage MP Base Opaque. Step 2. Application of Vintage MP Shade Opaque. Step 3. Build-up of Vintage MP Unilayer porcelain. Step 4. Individual characterization with Vintage Art stains. Vintage MP Base Opaque is used as the foundation layer. It provides a warm hue and forms a strong bond to the underlying metal frame. Mix the Vintage MP Base Opaque to a homogeneous consistency and dispense an adequate amount of the paste onto the mixing glass slab. Ensure that the porcelain brush and spatula are clean and dry before applying the Vintage MP Base Opaque paste. Vintage MP Opaque liquid is added to adjust the viscosity of the Vintage MP Base Opaque as required. Dispense an adequate amount of Vintage MP Opaque liquid onto the glass slab. Dab clean the brush into the opaque liquid until it is soaked right through and remove excess liquid onto a tissue paper. Ensure the metal surface is clean. Apply a thin and even layer of Vintage MP Base Opaque paste onto the coping. This forms a strong, durable bond to the metal frame. Condense well with the Ceramosonic S condenser before firing. The use of the ultrasonic condenser assures that the porcelain particles are densely packed to minimize firing shrinkage and porosities. Ceramosonic S condenser displays ultrasonic vibrations of 28,000 Hz to enhance density of the porcelain. It comes with a touch sensor that automatically activates vibration when platform is contacted and has a choice of automatic 5 seconds or continuous 120 seconds vibration modes. Select the recommended firing schedule and fire the restoration at the set temperature. Vintage MP Shade Opaque A30 imparts the desired hue to the restoration. Vintage MP Shade Opaque ensures effortless and efficient masking of underlying metal even with just 0.1 to 0.15 mm thickness. It has an eggshell appearance upon firing for better coverage and aesthetics with higher saturation of color for a more accurate shade reproduction. Dispense an adequate amount of the Vintage MP Shade Opaque A30. Vintage MP Opaque liquid is added to adjust the viscosity of the Vintage MP Shade Opaque as required. Dispense an adequate amount of Vintage MP Opaque liquid onto the glass slab. Apply an even layer over the base opaque to cover the entire frame. Tap the restoration gently with a brush shank to even out and condense the paste. The serrated handle of the Lacron carver can be used too. Reapply the paste at the margins and areas wherever the opaque paste is insufficient to assure that the underlying metal is completely masked. Condense the restoration further with the Ceramosonic S condenser. Set the porcelain furnace as per the recommended firing schedule for shade opaque paste and fire the restoration. Allow the coping to cool. The fired shade opaque has an eggshell appearance, so there is diffused reflection of light on the surface that obscures the underlying metal frame for better aesthetic results. The vintage MP shade opaque paste imparts the desired hue to the restoration. Vintage MP Uni Layer porcelain is available in two translucencies: LT low translucent and HT high translucent. LT low translucent is chosen for this posterior restoration. Dispense an adequate amount of Uni Layer LT porcelain powder and mix with vintage mixing liquid HC to obtain a homogeneous mixture. The opaqued framework is placed on the working model before the build-up. First, build up the occlusal surface with vintage MP Uni Layer LT porcelain. Gently occlude the upper and lower jaws to obtain contact in centric occlusion. If the contact points are not established, add more porcelain in those areas. Absorb excess water with a tissue paper if the porcelain is too wet. Once the contacts are established, continue to build up the crown by adding more porcelain on the mesial, distal and buccal surfaces, while constantly checking and adjusting the occlusion. Remove the working model from the articulator for easy build-up of the lingual surface and cuspal build-up. Once the gross anatomy of the whole crown is achieved, elevate the vertical dimension of the articulator by 1 mm. Adjust the crown by reducing bulky areas and add on in areas where porcelain is insufficient. Recreate the desired final tooth anatomy by referring to the contralateral tooth as a guide. Use a porcelain knife to carve the cusps, ridges, grooves and fossa of the molar. The crown can still be adjusted by adding porcelain to the insufficient areas or by trimming off bulky areas. Next, smoothen the crown with a wet brush. Then condense sufficiently with a hammer by tapping gently on the model. Place the working model back on the articulator to check the contact points again by lowering the pin down to the table by 1 mm. Add porcelain onto insufficient areas. Next, the proximal surfaces are cleared for easy removal of the crown. Continue to adjust and define the crown after removal. Make final adjustments to the surface details with the cutting knife. Condense lightly with the Ceramosonic S condenser while absorbing any excess water with a tissue. Set the recommended firing program in the porcelain furnace and fire the crown as per the firing schedule. Anatomical contouring is an essential step where all the fine surface details are recreated. The Ceramic Technique System Kit is designed with a detailed selection of abrasives for finishing both the metal and porcelain surface. Place the crown on the model and check the proximal contacts with an articulating paper. A double-sided articulating paper is used to check occlusion, identify high points in the restoration, and also compare the surface texture. Reduce any bulky points on the mesial and distal proximal surfaces with the Dura Greenstone WH6 from the Ceramic Technique System Kit. Check the contact points with articulating paper until the crown fits perfectly in the die. Place the working model back into the articulator and check the occlusal contacts with articulating paper. Adjust the high points with Dura Greenstone WH6. Reduce the premature contacts with the help of the articulating paper until the pin touches the occlusal table in both protrusive and excursive movements. Once the occlusal contact is adjusted, finish the gross anatomy of the buccal, lingual and occlusal surfaces with Dura Greenstone TC4. Adjust finer details such as the buccal and lingual grooves using Dura Greenstone IC3. Define the fossa and grooves and characterize the ridges and cusps with a fine diamond burr. Remove the surface scratches with a soft-cut PA silicone polisher before staining. Check the shade of the restoration to assure that it matches the shade guide. The oral environment is simulated by applying water on the crown surface. The restoration shade can be easily adjusted with the help of Vintage Art stains. Vintage Art is a fluorescent, easy-to-use paste-type porcelain stain, specially created for easy reproduction of individual characterizations and modification of shades. These ready-to-use paste-type stain colors are easy to intermix to a homogeneous shade. Optimal handling characteristics assure a uniform bubble-free application. Dispense a few drops of art-stained liquid onto the glass slab and apply on the surface of the whole crown with the stain brush. Compare the shade of the crown with the A3 tab of the shade guide. Select AS A-shade stain paste and mix well before applying. Dispense an adequate amount of stain onto the mixing slab and apply sparingly on the crown surface till the shade matches A3 tab in the shade guide. Once A3 shade is achieved, fire the crown as per the glaze firing program.